Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention. This is your boy, the coach from the WWE. I would like to welcome you to the very first wrestling podcast in the world to take you on a weekly deep dive into classic matches along with legends of the squared circle. Enjoy the discussion. Enjoy the back and forth. There's so much to get into. Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Payoff.
We are live, and it is another edition of The Payoff. As always, I'm Tom. That's Jeff. Welcome to The Payoff. Jeff, our first women's match. But first, how the hell are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. You know, we're in the deep into that September month. Summer's long gone, you know, at this point. And so, like, it was never even here, you know. But wrestling, well, never ending. We always got it. And so always good things, you know. I say always good things happening there. At least it's always happening. It may not always be good. But wrestling, never ending. It's eternal. So good stuff, though.
This shit never ends, man.
It doesn't.
Even when I try to stop, you know, I can't.
Yep. We can't get away. Yep. Absolutely. So.
Here's the thing, like, even at times where I've probably been most annoyed or frustrated with the wrestling business, Tuesday morning, I'm still checking the Raw results.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like, that's like somebody
yep.
said that to me not that long ago. Like, wait, do you watch every week? And I'm like, no, but I will say that on almost a daily basis for, you know, since the internet's been around, I've at least checked what was going on and read the results. Like, yep. AEW, admittedly, like, I don't watch a ton of AEW. I don't watch weekly. You know, I catch some pay-per-views, but I still read the results, right? Why? Yeah. I don't know. Like, what does it matter if Orange Cassidy wins or loses, you know, on a Wednesday night? I don't know, but I definitely read the results, read the news. Nothing that's really happened in the wrestling business has gotten by me for a few decades now. I may not have watched it all live or seen it all ever, but I at least know that it happened.
We're gluttons for punishment. That's
oh my God. No kidding. So yeah, so
we'll never give it up. But yeah,
no, I haven't watched 3 hours of every Raw, but I've at least skimmed through the results and, you know, caught the big angles on video. So, dude, quickly, everyone knows this, but we're at Payoff Pod, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Payoff Pod. A lot of good engagement. Love hearing from you guys. Love kicking around different ideas. Always just good debate and banter. And, you know, when we can keep it lighthearted and talk wrestling, social media is a wonderful thing. Like, at least, you know, on my Twitter wrestling feed, I love it, man. It's when we deviate into, you know, everyone being a doctor and a political strategist and an expert in everything that we run into problems. But I love the wrestling conversation on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. So as always, follow us on Payoff Pod, engage with us. We love kicking around ideas, talking about stuff. Makes it a lot of fun for us and for you, and love to know what you're digging and what you want us to cover. So, Jeff, you picked more of our upcoming matches than I did. So this was one of your selections. I'm excited to cover it, but why did you want to cover it?
Yeah, and we always bounce ideas off each other, and I got motivated one day and picked kind of our fall slate. And so this was one, we had been looking, the honest to God truth is, before like kind of the NXT days, it was hard to find like a great women's match that was like technically worth it. But there's probably, at least a half dozen, probably maybe, even a dozen that, stand out for, being monumental and being really good. And so this one worked out really well because, it primarily was the anniversary. And so when I was kind of looking at the dates and I realized like this match took place, it was September 17th and we're, kind of at the end of September at this point, it just kind of worked out perfect to kind of have a conversation about this one. And so really just because, that was kind of the biggest driving force in us trying to focus on, some of that anniversaries and kind of when it happened and things like that. And it's crazy to kind of think like this match was almost 15 years ago. And so it doesn't feel that long ago, but, that's just us aging ourselves too. And so primarily it was just kind of, we knew we wanted to cover a women's match. We got a couple more coming up here too, just trying to, we're seeing the comments where people, are trying to do as much different stuff as possible. We got one of the biggest stinkers ever coming up pretty quick here too soon with WCW. And so, just a lot of different reasons I wanted to cover this one, but I'm excited to talk about it though. How about you?
Yeah. Trish, it's just crazy, man. This was 14 years ago, and this is her retirement match. And I mean, she still looks great. Physically is in as good a shape, as good in the ring. So sometimes it just amazes me when you have these layoffs. And I know she did a couple rumbles, couple matches along the way, but it's just wild. It's just hard to imagine doing something physically and then basically not doing it for 9 years like Edge or 14 years. Mm-hmm. And I know that you kind of, get your bumps and your calluses back and your ring feet, but it's just wild that, she retired then and to come back now and do what she's done and be so good. So anyways, man, I'm pumped to cover this because, it's a match I don't really remember. There's gonna be a lot of stuff that you kind of, I forgot that happened. Mm-hmm. And, we'll talk more about this during the match, but dude, there's a lot of historical significance to any of the women's stuff that we cover from this era because there was women's wrestling before this current incarnation, and who knows if it would have happened or not had it not been for these women. So, was everything that they did in this era good? No, it was the Divas Championship and all that stuff. But to see this and what
it laid a lot of groundwork, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So, great stuff. Let's jump right into the build of this one, dude.
Yeah.
Do you want me to actually say it?
You got to say it. We always say it, man.
All right, fine.
Part of the show.
It's time for the build.
Oh, it's time for the build.
All right, so Unforgiven 2006, dude. Again, 14 years ago. In some ways seems like just yesterday. Crazy, man. Crazy. We're in Toronto, as most of you know, Trish's hometown, Air Canada Centre, 16,000 in attendance, buy rate of about 290,000 buys. Man, it's just fun to look at these buy rates and just remember that every 30 days, both the WWF and, when it was around WCW, had to build to something where they were trying to generate millions of dollars in buys. It's just, you forget about that. And, not that the pay-per-views don't matter now, but they really just don't matter as much, and it's just, you forget that, so the night after this show, it was, okay, we have a pay-per-view coming up in 30 days. We have to try to get another $30 from these people. They're not paying a $30 subscription fee to have these pay-per-views. We have to earn them pressing a button or calling in or going online and ordering something every 30 days. We, think about now, everything's subscription based, right? Netflix, you're not thinking every 30 days, do I pay them $10 or not, or 14 or whatever it is now, right? Everything's just a recurring monthly subscription. And unless you cancel, you just kind of have it, whether it's the WWE Network or Netflix or Hulu or so many other things that we subscribe to. Sometimes we don't even know what we're subscribing to. But this was an era where, again, every 30 days, we had to get someone to press a button that would, click $30 being charged to their credit card, which that's a lot of money. It's still a lot of money today. I mean, so what, today we're asking what, 50, 60? What was the last AEW pay-per-view? 59?
50, I think, yeah.
My God. So, you and I, we've probably talked about this on air. We've certainly talked about it off air. That's a lot of money, man. $60 is a lot of money for anything.
Well, and it's funny because you say click. We didn't click either. We had to call or maybe
towards the end you would press a button, but yeah, for a long time it was calling.
Call your cable provider. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And people don't nowadays. Kids these days, they don't know how good they got it. Right. Exactly. So.
Yeah, they don't have to spend the money, and like everything just kind of happens. You just flip on an app.
It's it. Yep.
All right, so let's run through the card here. Johnny Nitro, which, by the way, I still like that name better. I wish he would have just kept that name. Johnny Nitro is your IC champion, keeps the title over Jeff Hardy in a 17-minute match. That'd be a fun match to watch.
It was a decent match, actually. Yeah.
Did you watch it?
I didn't watch it, but it got like it got a 7 out of, or it was like a 7 out of 10. One of the reviews I read, and
nice.
Yeah, like it was a hot opener. It's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Well, and that's a match that we could get on SmackDown in any given week, right?
Right. Exactly. Yep. Absolutely.
Kane and Umaga in a 7-minute double countout. That was probably
not a 7 out of 10.
That was not that did not get 4 stars from
no,
Meltzer.
it did not.
Then we had the Spirit Squad, Kenny and Mikey, with Johnny, Mitch, and Nikki defeating the Highlanders. I don't really remember them, but that's a tag team championship match. The Spirit Squad keeps the titles. Now, here's a question, and I do not know the answer. Which Spirit Squad member is Dolph Ziggler?
Offhand, was it Nikki?
That was my guess. Is Nikki? You'll have to look it up. I have no idea.
Because his real name, it is. Because his real name is Nick. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another show. But
we'll break down the Spirit Squad at a later date. Yeah, for sure.
You know what we should do? We could cover Spirit Squad DX. I think they did a Hell in a Cell.
We could do that. Yep. I'll add it to the list.
There you go. Add it to the list. Speaking of DX, they would defeat Big Show, Mr. McMahon, and Shane McMahon in a 25-minute Hell in a Cell match. I went back. I caught the end of this as I was getting ready to do some prep for Trish Lita. Looked like a pretty damn good match. The crowd was going nuts by the end of it, man.
This card, like the rest of this card, was pretty good from here.
Yeah. I know. Okay. So then you go into this match, Trish, Lita, title, Trish's final match. That's awesome. All right. Then Randy Orton and Carlito. And then your Randy Orton defeating Carlito, and then your main event, which I'm assuming was I remember this being a pretty good match.
It was very good. Yeah.
Okay, and again, this might be a good one for us to watch. John Cena defeating Edge to win the WWE Championship, 25 minutes in a TLC match. So for an off, kind of B show pay-per-view, you had Trish Lita in Trish's retirement match, DX Big Show, Shane and Vince in a Hell in a Cell. A good IC title match, and then your TLC main event was Cena and Edge.
Yep.
Pretty damn good pay-per-view.
Overall, yeah. And this was, like you said, this was coming off of SummerSlam. And so to come off of one of the big four and then do this, like you said, this was at a point when the buys were important and kind of actually building a little bit more was important too.
Well, and I, without going back and looking at, call it 2006 pay-per-views in totality, I will tell you this, I'm curious what you think of it. I feel like in the network era, there are far more pay-per-views that are completely missable than there were in this era back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Think about how many pay-per-views now, because you and I, like, one of us will watch it, one of us will be like, yeah, I'm going to watch it later. And then you'll text me and be like, hey, what do I watch? I'm like, Yeah. Right? Like, if you don't watch any of it, or just scroll through Twitter and catch some highlights or something, in this era, look at this pay-per-view. This is a pretty damn good show. And I feel like there's just again, I'm not saying every pay-per-view, but there are definitely quite a few WWE pay-per-views now that top to bottom completely are 100% missable. Like the one before SummerSlam with the Extreme Rules Horror Show. There was nothing on that show that was like, oh yeah, you should go back and watch that match. It was really good.
Yeah. And we're usually, like, you and I, we're usually not let down by an NXT. There may be like one bad match on an NXT card, but like even that's rare. But it's different too. It's a different type of show. But yeah, I'm with you.
All right. So storyline standpoint, you could probably spend 2 hours talking about this because there's so much. But what are some of the highlights that got us to this final match?
So I cut some details here because there's some things that you and I want to talk about at a later date. And so I will cover some of these things. And so I'll start too by saying, you and I have been saying retirement match for this, and people might be like, well, hang on, she just had a match against Charlotte Flair last year and 2019. We get it. Like, yes, but
yeah, spoiler alert, wrestlers come out of retirement.
Yes. Yeah.
All of them.
We're filling up the jar here again for, every time they come out of retire, every time they retire and come back. So
of guys that have not come out of retirement, Steve Austin hasn't.
Nope.
Who else?
Michaels has.
Rock has. If you say Taker's kind of,
we're at the
walk away and come back.
Yeah, he will. Like
Foley
I said, I know.
Came back a month after.
Kane came back. Yep. The Rock came back. Yeah. Like everybody comes back. It's just how it is. Like Goldberg came back. Like Sting came back. Like it's easier to list who has than who hasn't. Like, so yeah. But so we got a lot of that. But while this match taking place, Unforgiven 2006, we're going to go all the way back to 2000, 20 years ago, and her making her in-ring debut. It was June 22nd, 2000. It was an episode of SmackDown. She was on a winning tag team. It was TNA against the Hardy Boys and Lita. So from day one, her and Lita were kind of in each other's universes. And so it's important to note that while there's all kinds of encounters that they had over the 6 years, it might, storylines might have come and gone. Right out of the gate, these two were kind of, joined, if you will, in kind of the matches they were having. One thing is, as I was kind of reading through a lot of this, she won the title a lot. But there was a lot of really injuries that she was dealing with too, which I don't think I realized obviously at the time and kind of what was happening. This was 2000. I would have been, in my high school. So I was watching a lot during this time, but they did a good job of covering it. And it was never long-term injuries. She hurt her ankle. She dislocated her shoulder. She broke her hand, but she was always kind of on TV. Nowadays you see there's so many times where they have to forfeit the belt or it's a vacancy. And so they have to figure out what they're doing. She was still on TV. She was still doing what she needed to do, to give the fans a show and kind of have that. So really what you had though was their feud. It started when you had Lita Trish, attacking Lita just over the course of a period of time, like Raw, SmackDown, just kind of going back and forth. There was actually a match between the two of them where Stephanie McMahon helped Trish win. And so Trish started winning her belt. Her first title, it would have been November 2001. It was Survivor Series. She had it for about 70 days. Then she won it in 2002. She won it twice in 2002. Then she won it in 2003 at WrestleMania 19. That was Seattle. And so we've got all these different times where she kind of keeps winning the belt. And then when we get now, I'm going to kind of fast forward, jump through time a little bit. She won it for the fifth time. It was actually Bad Blood, June 2004. It was a match. It was a four-way, her, Victoria, who was the champ at the time, Gail Kim, and Lita. So again, Lita just kind of always being in that, kind of realm and kind of always things happening. So you and I can speak a little bit more to how this contributed to women's wrestling overall. But after this, really that year, 2004, this was one of the kind of first main event of Raw for the championship for the women. Yep. And so it was a huge event at the time. If I kind of went back and watched it myself, she came out in the face shield, if you remember, because her quote nose was broken. And that actually played into the match a little bit as we kind of kept going and things like that. And so this is one, it's on our list. Again, not a technical match by any means, but because of just what it was, and we'll talk about this during the match, it was a big deal. So Trish, though, she had really through this match, this was like the famous kind of, infamous, however you want to look at it, feud with Mickie James that she was having. And so it was that WrestleMania 22, April 2006, just a few months before that. She actually lost the belt to Mickie James. She had it for almost a year and a half. Again, this is another one where, it's on our list because of the build was incredible for this. There was a lot happening, but, she had just lost the belt to Mickie James. And so actually during a rematch, this is where she dislocated her shoulder. Excuse me, I can talk. But she was on TV. She was rehabbing it. Dislocate her shoulder. I feel like it'd be out for 6 months, but 6 weeks later, she's out doing her thing. So, cool. So again, came back though. lost again to Mickie James in that, like, kind of the comeback match, if you will, which ended really like the better part of a year storyline between her and Mickie James. And so kind of getting a little bit closer into this one, this is where you started to, and again, I'm cutting for, the sake of future episodes, but this is where you had the Edge, Lita, kind of Matt Hardy behind the scenes craziness. And then also like, Trish just being in some weird angles as well too with Vince. And so it just, stuff you couldn't do nowadays, but it's just kind of how it happened and kind of how to play it out. And so, so you had these like quote couples matches because storyline Trish was with Carlito, which go Carlito. You had Lita with Edge and kind of, breaking away from the Hardys. And so it kind of having that. But so her last match on Raw, it was actually September 11th, 2006. She beat Mickie James on that one. So, but then after that, Lita, of course, in the storyline, I'm going to retire Trish Stratus. That's how we kind of got to that. And so this was one, though, again, like just the back and forth between like the couples and kind of having that. And so in like doing that. So Lita, on the other hand, I don't want to leave her out of this story, of course. Again, she had been I almost feel like, at the time watching this, like she was the counter to Trish. Like she was a little bit more hardcore, a little bit more punk. Like I was actually a bigger Lita fan than a Trish fan myself. I don't know about you. And so, but that was just, how they were portrayed on TV and, just when they were out there in their styles and things like that. And so kind of having that, but Lita, there was, again, a lot of behind the scenes stuff where, she wasn't really happy with what was happening. There was a lot of angles with, the Hardys and kind of, her being overshadowed by Matt. He got fired at this time. So it's just a lot of behind the scenes politics that was going on with her. But, this match, though, getting it, this was too, if of course, remember for a different day, this was the hot unbridled sex in the middle of the ring with Edge and Lita as well too. And so we kind of had that storyline happening as well too. So just kind of, not while that didn't directly like involve Trish, like the women's storylines, like we said, weren't great. There wasn't a lot happening, but the build to this was like the two of them had a long history against each other. There was, cross paths quite a bit over this entire time. And so, you could have just, while there was all this other kind of side things, like we kind of said, like the distractions on Twitter, like there's a whole lot of distractions happening as well too, but just very simple, like, Trish, I'm going to retire you at this next pay-per-view. It's pretty straightforward when you kind of cut away all the crap and the fat and kind of look at what's happening. And so I'm okay with that storyline. So at this one, though, again, Lita it was her third women's championship. She had beat Mickie James. It was August of that year. So actually really just about a month prior to this pay-per-view, which is how Lita had the belt going into this, was because she beat Mickie James. So a lot of weird angles here. Like I said, a lot of things that we will, that we can cover on a different episode, and we plan to, but, just kind of the behind the scenes and just kind of shooting the arrow straight. It was like, I'm just going to retire you. And that's what we got.
Whew.
I know.
That's a lot. That's a mouthful.
Stuff. There is. Yeah. Things happening. So that's all right.
So here we are. Big kind of, there's finality to this, right? Because, and I prefer when they say, I like it more when it's, hey, this is my final match versus a retirement stipulation. Because like Batista saying, hey, if I lose, my career's over. Well, then you knew he was going to lose.
Yeah.
You knew Flair was going to lose, right? Like, it's just better when Michaels, it's better when they say, hey, look, win or lose, this is it. This is my final match. I'm leaving it all out there. I actually think that's more dramatic than if I lose, I will retire, because that they're going to lose. The second Michaels Taker match, there was no suspense. You knew Taker. You knew that was his last match. You knew it was Flair's last match. That's why I really like this build better, because, hey, this is it. And then you sit there and you're like, oh, well, she's going to retire as champ. And then you're like, well, no, you put someone over on their way out. It creates more drama in an odd way.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And so interesting how it played out. I think it was good. But if you're ready, my friend.
Unforgiven 2006. So if you want to watch this with us, 1 hour and 39 on the dot of Unforgiven 2006. 1 hour, 39 minute mark of Unforgiven 2006. Jeff, are you ready, my friend?
Give us the line, buddy. I am ready.
All right. It's time for the payoff.
Ho! It's time for the payoff.
All right, here we are. Both in the ring.
Going at it. I said it before the match. I'll say it again now that we're on the air. The wrestling gear of both women, it definitely it shows when women's wrestling date and time, because that wouldn't fly nowadays. But
that's probably not what they would be wearing.
Yeah. So here we go. Retirement match. So like we were saying just before the kind of break here of like what, that kind of stipulation and things like that. But I do think that it does very much work in this sense, like you said, of just kind of like it's our hometown, like, kind of what's happening. I had thought like really if she, like debuting in 2000 and then this is 2006, I thought she had a longer career than that.
Yeah. Well, especially because she was managing at first. She wasn't even wrestling for all of it.
Right, exactly. And so, and I say she has had a long career because she's 20 years later, she was still in the ring and still doing this. But like, I'm saying like that the run of itself of like 6 years, like, yeah, just kind of interesting. And it just felt like it was a lot longer than that.
Do you remember when she debuted?
I do not actually.
I do, because I was just like, oh my God, what is that?
Yeah. So it's just right out of the gate, diving, a little action on the outside.
Just pounding her.
I'm interested. Why is the
match before this was Hell in the Cell. That was that DX match, and I only caught the end, but Triple H, Shawn, and Vince were all just soaked in blood. So I'm guessing that might have something to do with it.
Wipe it all down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like it's got like a sheen to it, yeah. For those of you at home that are not watching right in the moment, so right out of the gate, though, I'll say kind of quick action. Like there's definitely no rest holds right now, which is interesting. And so kind of speaking to the point we kind of touched on and kind of the laying the foundation, and you hear it a lot of times, and it is actually good to hear, like especially a lot of the current wrestlers, like they recognize like what these women did for them.
Well, let me ask you this question. Are you more impressed with what Trish and Lita did, or more impressed with what Charlotte and Sasha have done?
Me personally, it's what these two have done.
Yeah, I kind of lean that way too.
And for me, my rationale is because to me, like everything is stacked against them at this time. Like this was when, we're talking about it in future, kind of upcoming episodes, like just how women were portrayed, and it's still not great, every time, but like, they weren't portrayed well at all during this time. Like it was bra and panty matches. It was, all about the puppies and things like that. And so,
well, that's a great point. Now you're told, hey, they're athletes and they're equal, and there's the Me Too movement, and they're put in prominent positions, and they get their own pay-per-view, and it's called the women's title, not the Divas title. So in a lot of ways, it's way easier to be, to be, portrayed as a women's wrestler now than it was then. So you're exactly right. It's far easier now to be taken seriously than it was at this time. So for them to capture people's attention, to main event Raw, for not everyone to be getting up to go to a bathroom break, it's far more impressive. And furthermore, they didn't have anyone to emulate. I mean, maybe Fabulous Moolah and Alondra Blaze, but the analogy I'll use is like Tiger Woods, where all these young guys now golfing, it's because of Tiger Woods. Like these women didn't, what were they supposed to do? Watch Alondra Blaze and a bull in a Kano and be like, I'm going to be a women's wrestler. So, it was a lot harder for them. They didn't have much. And you're exactly right. They basically trailblazed. And even though there had been women's wrestling before this, remember, there was a gap where the title was kind of dormant. And they really weren't even doing anything with it. Then they brought it back, and it was just a silly prop, and it was bra and peony matches. So yeah, they actually are wrestling a match here. It's really significant. And yes, I'm far more impressed with them than I am with today's women, not to take anything away from them.
No, and there's still a lot, like, I agree, like, there should definitely be why there hasn't been like Evolution 2 doesn't make any sense. Like, you know, like, because the quality of like the in-ring product is definitely a lot higher too. Now, this match itself, like, they're beating the crap out of each other right now. Like, we're not very far into this one. Oh, and then here comes giant tumble outside from the top rope. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. Just kind of spilling out there.
Both out. Jeez. Yeah, that was impressive.
And it's definitely a planned spot, but yeah, it still looked painful. So in doing it, and it's been interesting. I think it was, in the last year or whatever it was, like, some, male and female wrestlers, like, they don't appreciate or don't like the diva title having the name of the diva title, but then like, especially like some of the I say these older wrestlers, like this generation of wrestler right here, like being like, you needed that, like you needed the divas title. Well, yes, the kind of name wasn't great.
It was more of a branding and marketing thing. It wasn't intended to be offensive, and I don't think it was. I think it was just, hey, diva. It's they made the cool title and stuff like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but yeah,
the belt actually looked pretty fucking cool. Like, and so, but then you had Total Divas, you had, and so that whole show. But I get the change, and I'm happy for the change too. So on the first pin attempts here, there you go. But these are two, and this was two
very good match so far.
Yeah. So this is, I say, when you and I were both like, 2006. This would have actually been like post high school for both of us in our college days, actually. And so, I wasn't watching as much, and so, but just interesting, I always associated these two because when they started kind of feuding in 2000, or even just kind of being each other's universe, like that's what I remember was these two were just always kind of in the world of each other. Because of course there were other women that were out there as well too, but these were definitely your top two stars.
Oh, no question.
And they went back. I was watching in my prep for the show. They actually did go back and watch that kind of main event match together, which again, we'll talk about that at a different time. But you can even tell for them, like just how important that match, like all of that, like, being that first main event. And, nowadays it doesn't seem like a big deal because you got Bayley and Sasha going, with their Iron Man match. You've got the women's, Evolution pay-per-view. You've got all these, there is a women's Rumble. There's a women's, elimination chamber and all these other things. But, these, like right now, like they're putting on a good wrestling match and really, like you said, we keep saying it, but laying the groundwork.
Do you know how long it was until Trish wrestled again after this match?
I do. I have it actually for the aftermath.
Then we'll save it for then. I was going to give you a fun fact, but we'll cover it after.
Yep. And so yeah, again, while we say retirement, it's a very fluid term in the world of sports entertainment, as we all know. So, but it is one that we can discuss. Yeah.
I'm really impressed with this match so far.
Yeah. And this is too to remember, like, this is the card itself is, they're in Toronto. So I think it's important to remember, like, while, Edge is Canadian, from Ontario, but, you've got the Canadian main eventer in this one, but this is like, it's Trish's hometown. Like, this is so much of this and like her really putting on the show. And like you said, it's interesting to me too, like how the angle played of like, are they going to give her the women's title again? Like, and this was not, I say not the internet infancy, like, the internet was around at this point, but so much of this was still kayfabe. Like, you still, weren't 100%, what was real, what wasn't. I feel like at this point it hadn't totally, like, at least for me, the veil of illusion was still up with some of this happening. So I can believe that these two hated each other and the feud made sense.
So my senior year of high school, I got front row tickets to a house show, and Trish was managing at the time, and I'm front row, and she was like, I mean, a few feet from me, and I had this just great picture of her. I got it blown up and hung it in my locker my senior year. So when you opened up my locker, it was Trish Stratus.
That is,
and it was a personal photo that was taken too. It wasn't like a poster or anything. I was extra proud of that. Took it with hell, it wasn't even a digital camera. It would have been like, you had to go get the pictures developed, and I had it blown up.
Yep, rolling the wheel on it. Yeah, that was one because I remember not too long ago. It was actually Christmas last year, and I was home, and I found like an old album of like wrestling photos from like a show I had gone to, and you could tell I was like in the nosebleeds, but like still taking pictures of the ring. So I got no fucking clue who was wrestling at the time, but like, but luckily we were smart enough. Like we had cut like we had like the program, and so I at least kind of knew from that. But like, and I feel like everybody has like those long nosebleed, like can't see what the fuck's going on seats, and so yeah.
Trish finally got her little like head scissors.
She had done it on the outside earlier too, but now we're back in the ring.
Been doing that quite a bit.
Oh, it's the big kick.
It's a roundhouse kick. Is that going to be enough?
Nope, close. And so you've got, and this was again the age of signs as well too. You've got all the signs for Trish in the audience as well too.
Bulldog.
Oh, trying to roll her up, but nope. Here we go. Fans on their feet.
Wow.
Going nuts. Immediately on their feet. Yeah, when they know it's coming into the sharpshooter. Lita crawling for the ropes, trying to get there. And she's fighting hard, and Trish dragging her back into the middle. Ooh. She cranked back on her hard. Yeah. Oh, man.
Wow.
And so there it is. And new women's champion retiring. It's a good sign. Trisha's the number one diva. God bless you. Yep.
Place went nuts.
And they're still all on their feet for her. Yep. There's people crying. I saw a woman crying in the audience. Like, and this is, I feel like,
don't make fun of people that cry at wrestling events.
Hey man, no, not at all.
You weren't with me when Shawn Michaels got inducted into the Hall of Fame.
It's still real to me, damn it. Like even I fell for some of the more recent things. So yeah, it happens. And this is one, it's so important, reading the crowd. Like, oh, this is one, like we've said before on some of these matches we watch, like, if she had not won, oh, boy.
That was an excellent match.
Yeah. So, if you're ready, we've got some thoughts. I'm ready to move on if you are.
Wow. Great match. Place went nuts. Hey, did she do the sharpshooter regularly?
I don't remember.
I don't think she did, but as soon as she went for it, they knew what she was doing. I didn't remember her ever doing that move. I think it was just a Toronto kind of tribute thing, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways.
It would make sense.
All right, so let's jump into the aftermath.
Ho! It's time for the aftermath.
All right, what'd you think?
That was great. Like, we make a point.
Significantly better than I expected.
Yeah, and you and I make a point to try not to watch, kind of update ourselves. So we have to read things. And so, but to actually watch the match, like you and I try and avoid it. And I'm glad that's one that we didn't watch because it was worth it.
Absolutely. That was really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, So kind of what happened, with this, of course, her winning the title in her retirement match, makes things a little bit interesting. And so really right after this, the title was vacated because this was her 7th and final women's championship. So kudos to Trish Stratus. So you did, though, have them making some appearances like over Lita retired not too long after this too, quote unquote. And so we'll get into that on a different episode too, but they made an appearance really like that next year. It was Raw's 15th anniversary. And so, you had a thought on her next match after this. And so do you want to give your fact? I have the date in front of me.
December 22nd, 2008, her and John Cena defeated Beth Phoenix and Santino Marella.
Yes, mixed match
on a Raw. And I assume it was a surprise appearance. I don't know, but yeah, I was like, wow, I thought she stayed retired for a long time.
Yeah, and so 2 years. But then also it was about a year later after this in 2009, she was the guest hostess of Raw. But then also she was in a 6-person tag match with MVP Mark Henry and her beating Beth Phoenix, Chris Jericho, and the Big Show. And then of course even more recently than that, she was 30, right, in the inaugural Women's Royal Rumble. And then also losing to, was it 30, right? Do I have it?
I don't remember. I don't remember if she was 30 or not.
Anyways, and so having that, but then also
I want her to win the damn thing.
Right. It would have been great. A quick run, a different conversation for a different day, but like that, how long do you keep a legend around type thing? So, having that, but then also having just a fantastic match against Charlotte Flair at SummerSlam, just this last year. And so, and that one was just incredible. So,
yep.
So we got that as well too.
I want her to win.
It's one give her the shot. He went over huge either way. So, Lita actually, and so it was like I said that next night when the Raw Women's Championship, the Women's Championship, not just Raw, but it was on Raw, that the title was vacated. There's actually a tournament where they were going to crown the next champion. And so Lita actually won the tournament. It was November 5th of that year. A bunch of different competitors, things like that. At Cyber Sunday, which again, why haven't they brought back Cyber Sunday? I'll rant about that a different time. But I was curious. This was actually the first ever Lumberjill match as well too. And so I kind of looked up what the vote stipulation was. It was close actually. With 46% of the vote, the Diva Lumberjack match won, but 40% it would have been a no DQ match, and then submission match was 14%. So had that, and then just not too long after this, Lita kind of giving her speech that her final match is going to be at Survivor Series of that year. It's also on our list. That's another one too where that match did not go great, and so it's one that we will kind of check in as well too. So Tom, any thoughts on kind of the aftermath or just kind of what happened here? What are you thinking?
Couple things. First of all, Trish is the youngest Hall of Famer of all time, 37 years old when she actually went in, which is hard to believe.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. 7-time champion. I don't know. Has Charlotte passed that yet? I mean, we know she will. I don't know how they track it. Not that it really matters, but has she passed 7 yet?
No.
Oh, really? I'm surprised.
Wait, for titles? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Trish is 7-time champion, which was the most. And
you're looking for the most. You know what? I don't know.
I don't know if Charlotte passed that, but I know that when she retired, she was the only 7-time champion. 4-time PW Insider Woman of the Year award. The only other thing, Jeff, I'll add is I prefer. I mean, it's tough because like the women now. I mean, look, they're doing all these amazing things, but sometimes I think they almost beat us over the head too much with it. And it's like they all have to cry and hug at the end. I like this. That you made the point during the match, which I think is very important. You're like, I don't think they like each other. And there was a really good feud, and it was a really brutal match for, kind of the way that they worked at that time. And you bought it. And it wasn't that they hugged and, held each other's hands after the match. No, Trish just was champion and place went nuts, and Lita kept being a heel. So I think they too much of the women's presentation now, it's a little too lovey-dovey, of like, oh shucks, hey, we're just all together and we're all going to hold each other's hands up and celebrate after a match with tears in our eyes. I like more of the heel baby face presentation, and I think they kind of did it better with Rousey. But even her, it was like, remember when they had all the women celebrating Rousey's win after SummerSlam? I think is the one when she won the women's title. It's terrible. Like,
it takes away from it.
Yeah, I mean, all the men aren't celebrating. So, it's like at some point it's like, okay, we did all these things. We have our first Royal Rumble. We, have 2 titles. We're the women's division. At some point it's like, let's just stop. You just treat it like it's the men. And that's and they don't, and they need to start doing that. So I really like this presentation. So that's all I had.
Yeah, so getting into the reviews and then kind of our scores here. So this year, Trish, she was the #1 women's wrestler of 2006. Lita was number 4. I see why, but the Trish and Mickey was the feud of the year, actually, which makes sense because, like, their WrestleMania match and all that. And so, and that was a very long build, a lot happening. And so that one makes sense. So the kind of a couple write-ups on this one, of course, in the Observer newsletter, Lita versus Trish for the women's title. Trish tripped walking up the steps, which we didn't catch that on ours. We'll have to go back and see that. But, loud thank you, Trish chants. Lita cut her off and went to work on her lower back. They had a hell of a battle on the top rope, and both girls took a terrifying bump off the top to the floor, which you and I both reacted to that one. For 2 people about to get the hell out of the business, they were sure working their asses off. In fact, I was scared to death half the time. Finish saw Trish go to her springboard bulldog, but then turn it into a sunset flip. Lita sat down and grabbed the ropes. Ref caught her and broke it up, so Trish rolled through and then stood up and stepped through into a sharpshooter. The place went fucking insane. Lita fought towards the ropes, but then Trish pulled her back into the middle and sat down and got the submission. Everyone was on their feet standing and applauding, including the announcers, and Lillian Garcia was crying. This was proof of God. Her final match in her hometown, and it may have been the best WWE women's match in years. This was the first feud of the show that must not continue. 3 1/4 stars. And one kind of other just random review that I found as well too was, this was absolutely everything it needed to be. The story, rivalry, the playing off of their previous matches, the emotion of the fans, and Trish and the finish were all perfect. I mean, I could nitpick Trish not working the leg or back much before the finish, but I can't get mad at her doing a damn sharpshooter in Canada to win a record 7th women's title. One of my favorite matches in WWE pay-per-view history. So, we'll jump kind of right into the scores. I will say I thought it was interesting. While he gave it 3 1/4 stars, I actually thought with how the write-up went, it doesn't match what I thought he would have given for the stars. Because when he says it's one of the best women's matches in years, then only 3 1/4 stars, it seems low to me for some reason. So I don't know why, at least in regards to that. Like for me, like this match was like an 8.5. Like I think that it didn't stop. It didn't need more time than they gave it. I think like it was, I say a little bit of fan service with, of course, like the sharpshooter in Canada, which, you and I could get in a ring and do a sharpshooter and maybe get a pop, but I still think though that like it was fast paced. Like it said, after this long feud, I'm glad she didn't wrestle anybody else. The right person kind of won this one. And it really was like a culmination of the 2 of them just having, really a 5-6 year career, 6-year career up to that point that just, it made sense to me. And so I'm going to stick with an 8.5. That was, as I say, sports entertainment, my friend. How about you?
I have this at an 8.
Okay.
I thought it was, there's a couple things, right? Because again, our payoff score isn't just bell to bell, kind of what happens in the match, but there's a pretty significant build here in terms of the storyline, in terms of these women taking women's wrestling to a far. I mean, think about women's wrestling. It had been around forever, right? I mean, there was the Fabulous Moolah, there was Leilani Kai, there was Alondra Blaze, there was there were all these women, okay, that had been wrestling. So it's not like, hey, women never wrestled. They've been wrestling for decades, but no one had ever been able to trailblaze or break through to the point where it mattered much. Okay. There was one women's match as an attraction, as part of a well-rounded wrestling card. That's what you got. You never got anything more than that. You never had it main event anything. You never really had much of it except, hey, we've got one match. So then look at what they did. And it was really good. And your average women's match now, it was far greater than it was in 2006. That match I just watched still holds up pretty well against everything that you'd watch, in today's day and age, right? I mean, I don't think that Charlotte Flair is 10 times better than anything that you saw there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you.
So for that to have taken place 14 years ago, knowing that women's wrestling had been around forever but never really mattered, and to know they main evented Raw, to know that they, that to me is more impressive than what we're seeing now. The stuff now, some of it is because the women are better, and let's just be honest, some of it is PR. Okay, why did the women's revolution happen? What happened because everyone told WWE to do it. It's not because they did it out of the goodness of their heart, okay? Yeah. Let's call a spade here. It was pressure, and that pressure wouldn't have happened had we not had what we saw in 2006. So again, massive historic significance. Women's wrestling had never really been given any time, attention, or care until these two and a handful of others came along. They created all of this. So let's just call this match one of the key moments of all of that, and the retirement of probably the best of them all. The place goes nuts. She retires as champion. And then it's really cool too, because you and I talk about the importance of the aftermath. Well, what's the aftermath of this match? The aftermath is in a whole different era with all these different women, with a women's Royal Rumble and a women's headlining WrestleMania and women's everything. Trish is back. Lita's back. And they wrestled with all these new stars and they held their own, and it was awesome. The first women's Royal Rumble was awesome. The Trish and Lita wrestling together was awesome.
Well, and even PWI, because I was looking it up, they didn't start giving the award, I say again, because they gave it in the 70s for a couple of years. And then at that point, it was the girl wrestler of the year, not the woman of the year. But 2000 was the first year they started giving the award again. And so, in that first, and so just the first few years up until this match. So it was Stephanie won it in 2000, and then Lita. And then you had Trish, Victoria, Trish. So a 4-time Woman of the Year, and nobody's even close. AJ Lee got it 3 times in a row, but she's not still wrestling, and that was 2012 to 2014. Becky's won it twice. Charlotte's only won it once. Sasha's won it once. Mickie James has won it twice, but I think even Mickie James winning it twice, it speaks to the ability of these women at the time and how underrated it really was, and how groundbreaking it was for them to be performing at that level. And I think you make a great point of I think it was proof when Trish got back in the ring with Charlotte a year ago, and she looked like she could have outpaced Charlotte.
And she's 45 or whatever the hell she is, and she hasn't wrestled, and she had a couple kids, and then she comes back out there. If you were watching that match and didn't know anything, and I just said, hey, watch these two, do you think one's way better than the other? You'd go, no, they're both in great shape. They're both fantastic athletes. Hell of a match. This is great. And then you go, well, hey, one of them is in the prime of their career and 15 years younger than the other one. Wait, what? So it's incredible. And I think it actually does not get enough attention, all this. And you know, not, again, you and I we don't plan on what we're going to talk about. These things just kind of organically happen. But my big takeaway from this episode, and I think you and I completely agree, is these women were really impressive back then.
Yep.
I won't say, hey, they're just as good as the women now in the ring, but they're pretty damn close. And they were doing it 15 years prior when fans were trained that women's wrestling was a bathroom break and nothing more, and TNA. And so for them to have done what they did is no disrespect to the women now, but what they did back then was more impressive. And the fact that Lita, Trish, Mickie James were all able to come back in and work with those women 15 years later and not lose a step is just incredible. You know, Trish and Lita and Mickie, and I use those three because it's not like they came back for the Royal Rumble, did a Hurricane Rana, wore a cute outfit, and were like, oh, you still got it. No. They wrestled like 20-minute matches with these women, held their own. Absolutely incredible. So, Trish and Lita, great match, great stuff. 8.5, I think you had it at. We loved it. If you haven't gone back and watched the match, go back and watch it. Great stuff. That's all I got for this one. Is there anything else you got, bud?
That's all I got. Oh, and to correct, Trish is only 44, not 45. So
I was close.
Credit where credit's due.
Well, she looks 28.
She's not that much older than us, but she's doing what she does. Yeah. So, good stuff, though. Good match. Glad we covered this one. Fun one, for sure.
A sneaky good episode. This was a lot of fun.
Yep, absolutely. So,
all right. Well, as always, at Payoff Pod, Jeff, Tom, thanks for joining us on another episode of The Payoff.